Welcome back. But if you have not watched how to construct a perfect CV for a guest-facing role in hospitality, then click the link in the top right corner and go watch that first. If you have made a successful CV and you are one of the lucky ones to get invited to an interview, then you would want to go in prepared. And you will need to have some stories to tell. These stories, first of all, should align with your CV. If you put on your CV that you enjoyed backpacking, but then in the interview, you say you would rather go on a fishing trip, and that would just come across either like you are slacking off and you just threw together your CV without any thought, or you didn't bother to update your CV with the latest information. So the stories you prepare should be in line with your hobbies and character traits in your CV. There are some questions that many in the hospitality industry are asking, so you might want some stories that highlight these areas. So, extra service, going above and beyond. Then recovering a guest or dealing with a disgruntled guest. If you're a team player, and how you would deal with stressful situations. These stories are typically judged with a star system. So it is a good idea to construct your answer around this. Now, STAR stands for situation, task, action, and result. So start your story describing the situation. Set the scene. Then describe what your responsibility was in this situation. Explain the steps you took to address the situation, and then say what the outcome of this situation was. To give you an example, if the interview asked you, tell me about a time when you resolved a guest issue, then you might say something like this. A few months ago, I had a guest who found her steak not as she wanted it, and she was very upset that she now had to wait while everyone on her table had the food already, and that this would get cold if they would wait, and you describe the situation. I had taken her order, and she told me that she wanted it medium rare. However, she found the steak to be cooked for too long and was more medium. Now we know how you were involved in the story. I went over there to speak with her and offered my sincere apologies. I promised I would have her new steak for her very shortly. I then took her plate to the chef and told him that the guest found it medium, and she asked for a medium rare, and if he could please make a new one for her. While the chef was making this dish, I noticed that her wine glass was nearly empty, so I brought her a glass of her favorite wine, and on the house, of course. And I had a short conversation with her where she mentioned she was going to a show after dinner and she didn't want to be late. I then went back into the kitchen to check, and the chef had already finished the new plate. I brought this to her immediately, and I invited her to come back after the show for a complimentary dessert. Now we know exactly what steps you took to rectify the situation. But don't stop there. She later returned after the show, and I got the dessert for her, and I asked her how she liked the show. She was raving about it and loved her evening, and this was just the perfect end. She explained that she typically only gets one night away from the kids per month, and she wanted it to be perfect. So later she even left a comment on TripAdvisor with my name as well and gave the service 5 stars. And now we know the result of how your actions impacted the guest. So that is how you construct situation, task, action, and result. A STAR interview or a STAR story. Remember, you will want several of these stories, but you can use these stories in multiple questions. In this case, the interviewer asked about resolving a guest issue, but it could have been about a question about, tell me about a time when you went above and beyond your duties, or tell me about a time when you took initiative, or tell me about a stressful situation you have experienced and how you dealt with that. Or it could be about your proudest moment where you would put more emphasis on the talk you had with the guest at the end of the evening and how happy she was. Or even about a colleague you found it difficult working with because you could twist it and then talk about how the chef might have been someone you found intimidating and was difficult going to him with any issues. So you explained it in a certain way to him where you deliberately said that the guest explained she wanted it medium rare, and in her opinion, this was medium, and ask if you could please make a new steak for her. Emphasis doing it for the guest and not for me as a colleague. I will link a list of possible questions in the description. This is more a general list of questions, not specific to hospitality. However, most can be applicable if you just change the word client to guest. I would suggest having at least 4 or 5 of these stories. There's no need to have more than 8 for sure, as you should be able to amend them on the fly. Usually you might be asked about 3 or 4 of these situations anyway. Now I hear you thinking, but sure, didn't you just say you will not need any experience, but then you come up with stories from experience? Well, yes and no. Of course, if you do have experience on your CV, you surely need to be taking examples from this experience. But even with no experience, you can think of stories that show your values and your thought processes. For teamwork, you could talk about the study group at school and how you assisted one of your study partners in understanding a specific topic. Or you may have a story about a hobby or a sport or an instrument you play. Maybe about solving an issue for your friends or giving a presentation at school. Be mindful that you make these stories detailed, but also straight to the point. No one wants to know what the weather was like when you were talking about giving a presentation, unless this is directly related to the presentation itself. General rule of thumb would be to keep it between 4 to 10 minutes long. My example was a little bit shorter because I don't want to take too much of your time with this video. These stories for sure will be the key to a successful interview. Next to these stories, you should also be prepared to answer some more general questions on topics such as, maybe they will ask you to name some competing brands. What are the 3 positive things your boss or ex-colleagues would say about you? Name something your previous boss, like something constructive, constructive feedback your previous boss gave you. Now, these are more general kind of topics that do not necessarily only focus on hospitality. You will also need to be able to explain what draws you to a role within hospitality. So match this to your values, such as you have a desire to assist others and think this is the perfect chance to do this. And also what your aspirations are. What would you like to achieve? And what can you bring to the team that no one else can? Other things you should know is what kind of guests the hotel caters to, or business or hospitality business. So what type of guests? And then again, your hobbies and your passions. And it is very interesting to talk very passionately about your hobbies. These are the things you're supposedly love doing. So if you get a chance to speak about it, then go into details. And go into details about what you would do, how regularly you would get to do this, and possibly why you enjoy it so much. And you will want to have specific questions that will help you decide if this hotel is right for you. And also it shows you have thought about things. Good things to ask would be, what is the typical progression like for someone that is joining the team that you are going to be joining? Same as what you can expect each day. What is your typical day like? What type of shifts would you possibly do? And does this include occasional night shifts, for instance? What are some of the team targets that the team needs to reach? Are there any organized team outings, some team building exercises, or staff parties? This shows that you are interested to get to know your team and to be involved with them. And then there are training programs. Are they provided for team members? And specifically ask from when these would be available, because some might not be applicable until you reach a certain supervisor level, or when you have been able, or when you have been at the company for a year. Then maybe how many other candidates are in the running for the role? How will the rest of the interview process go? When you expect to hear back from this role? And finally, it's definitely not a problem asking about wages and incentives to get this clarified upfront, but don't make it the only question you ask. This will just make it seem you only want this job for the money. And while this might be true, this is not how you want to be perceived. After your first interview, a few things can happen. You can either get declined. If so, don't feel bad. There are probably a ton of people in the running for the role, and you didn't have the click with the interviewer that someone else had. Don't worry, you'll find someone that you will connect with on a deeper level. And two, depending on the company or brand you are applying to and how professionally it's set up, you will either be invited for a second or third interview, or possibly a trial shift. If you are invited to another interview, it means that the team manager thinks you will be a good fit for this team. Then why are you invited for another interview and not just hired right then and there? Well, the first interview is mostly to see if you are a good fit within the team and if you will be able to complete the daily tasks. The second and or third interview is mostly geared towards if you align with the brand and match with the mission and vision. These interviews will generally be held with an HR representative, a senior manager in the hotel, or maybe even the hotel or general manager. Don't be scared to speak to a senior member of the management team. The team manager would not put you in front of them if he or she didn't think that you would be a good fit. Keep the same stories in mind you had from the first interview, but also be prepared to answer a few more things, such as what attracted you to the brand. If you didn't prepare well enough for your first interview and didn't know this then ensure you do know this time around. This is also a good thing to do and to ask during your first interview, as you will be speaking directly to someone who knows the brand very well. So ask them what the brand is like, what type of guests the brand caters to, what the core values are, and what the vision and mission are of the brand. With strong brands, the interviewer should have no issues answering these questions, and from the answer you can typically tell how well the company's brand is enforced. So use this information in subsequent interviews and you will seem well prepared and like you have done your research. I should not be saying this, but please go in properly groomed. Make sure you smell fresh, and for sure, do not chew any gum. Gum is a big no-no in the hospitality. Mints are the way to go, but of course, not during your interview. There should be nothing in your mouth during interviews, and yes, this has happened. Instead of multiple interviews, they might do a trial shift to see if you would be well suited for a role. This is your moment to shine. First of all, find out what they would like you to wear. That's always a good question to ask. And when going in for your shift, keep in mind, you are not trained, so you will not be expected to know how to do everything. What's important is if you seem interested in learning. So maybe take a notebook with you if it's a bit more of a computer-based role, such as a receptionist or guest services, guest relations agent. And if it's more of a physical role like a waiter or porter or housekeeping attendant or bellboy or man, depending on how that's called in your country, then be prepared to put in a lot of effort and try to be as helpful as possible. Again, you're not expected to know how to do the task, but you will be expected to show initiative and drive. So show that you are willing to put in a lot of effort. I remember my trial shift as a kitchen hand, and I was running around like crazy. I put in a lot of energy and effort and initiative, and I just did whatever I could and not stand passively waiting for something or something to be handed to me. I accidentally tipped a bowl of hot tomato soup over my hand that day, and I rinsed it off quickly and kept on going without a peep. That is the kind of effort you should be thinking of. Hard work and energy, but also being helpful, asking to get things for the person you are working with. Remember, this is the shift that can make or break your chances, so dedicate 100% of your efforts into this shift. If it is for a guest-facing role, then try to speak to a guest where possible. I know it can be daunting, but it is a good sign if you're able to communicate with guests from the get-go. Most likely, the member of staff that you are following will report back to the manager that you spoke with guests, and probably not so much as to what the conversation was about. So don't worry about the content, but just do your best to engage wherever possible with guests. With these tips, I am sure you can have a successful interview or trial shift and get hired. But as I mentioned, do not get discouraged if you are declined. There will be a brand or a company that aligns with you as a person, so keep at it. And also, don't place all your efforts into one basket, so to speak. Send your CV to a ton of different companies and have multiple interviews. This will also mean that you will be able to select the role and the brand that is right for you. Thank you very much for watching this video, and good luck with the recruitment process. If you learned something, then please do leave a like and let me know if it helped you get a job in the comments down below, or leave a comment if you feel I left something out of this video that you have come across in your interviews, or how about a good horror story on job interviews? It's okay, everyone has had them. Speak to you all very soon. As I mentioned, please follow the link here for tips on how to build your CV, and I will link some more videos here on how to be successful in the hospitality industry once you have been hired.